but we want to go ahead and get started. My name is Wendy Standorf, and I am an HR loss prevention training specialist. And I do HR related training throughout the state of Texas. I've been with the risk pool for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 25 years working in local government. I worked for 2 cities in the greater Houston area. I worked for the city of Pearland for 11 years, and then I was the HR director at the city of West University Place for 14 years. I get the privilege of traveling the great state of Texas to train our members. We have about 2,800 members throughout the state of Texas. The majority of them are cities, the majority of them are cities, and but we do have some others like water authorities, utilities, central appraisal districts, and things like that. And we probably cover about 175,000 employee lives in our coverage. I have with me as my co-host today, Johnny Vera. Johnny has been with the risk pool a short while, and I'll let him do a little bit of introduction about him and his background.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Like when you said, my name is Johnny Vera. I think I met some of you all in last week's training, and I know I've met Melissa and Valerie over some Zoom meetings. It is my pleasure to be here. Like when you said, I've been with the risk pool for going on a year already. Prior to that, I was with the city of Edinburgh. So I am a Valley boy. I'm here based out of the Valley. Prior to that, I was in the private sector for about 24 years. So a lot of risk management over those 24 years working with OSHA, but like Texas is not an OSHA state, but however, I still bring those risk management and safety practices that I obtained over those years into the city of Edinburgh when I was with the city. Now I can bring that into TML. So it is my pleasure to be here and serving the Valley and you guys as your loss prevention rep.
Thank you. And we are honored to be with your organization today doing training. We really appreciate the opportunity to bring you training. And a couple of housekeeping items. First, for those of you that are law enforcement and seeking TCOL credit, TCOL rules require that we have you that we show you on camera, on video, and for participation. And then if you would please private message Johnny with your PID number. We don't want to send that to everyone. There's a chat room. If you were in Paul's class last week, then you know there's a chat room. You can private message him, but I try to engage as much as I can. In some of these, it's a little more challenging. And in this platform, it's a little bit different than the input when we're able to bring training to our members, but it is a great opportunity and allows me to be in Rio Grande City in the morning, and in the afternoon I can be in the Panhandle. So you know, it's a great service to our members. You probably know in your organization where your emergency exits are. I cannot tell you where those are. I can't see them. So if you would just check those in case of an emergency where you're at, know how you need to evacuate. And so without any further ado, then I will go ahead and get started. We should finish right around 10:30. It's about an hour and a half class, and we'll be good to go. So Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Risk Pool, our why statement is why we exist is to partner with local government so that Texas communities are stronger together. Our core values include public service, fiscal responsibility, operational excellence, and integrity. Your organization probably has a why statement or a mission statement. You probably have core values, many of them probably very similar. And like TML, every decision that we make related to our members and internally related to our employees revolves around our why statement as well as our core values. The coverages that we offer our members is workers' compensation, liability, property, cyber liability, and special risk. variety of coverages that we do provide. And the main contact, of course, is Johnny is the loss prevention rep in your area. He's the one that coordinates the training for you. So today's presentation is sexual harassment. It's time to up your game. We want to make sure that we are doing, taking our training and everything, and we've got some learning objectives. At the end of this class, you should be able to identify various types of sexual harassment, identify ways to strengthen policies, identify the correlation of organizational culture to harassment, identify unacceptable behaviors and conduct, and identify and discuss the financial and legal implications of harassment. So y'all probably recall about 2.5, almost 3 years ago, there was a little shakeup in our world as it relates to sexual harassment. At the time, it was like September timeframe, I believe, maybe beginning of October. I was interviewing actually for the training position at TML. One of the things that they asked me to do was create a 10-minute PowerPoint to present as part of that interview process. And they gave me 4 topics to choose. They gave me FMLA, sexual harassment, 2 others. I don't even remember what they were, but my thought was, well, sexual harassment's been around for a really long time. I am not going to, it's not sexy topic. I'm going to talk about FMLA, which is way more exciting than sexual harassment, right? So much to my chagrin, here a couple of weeks after that, here comes Harvey Weinstein and #MeToo. That #MeToo that was retweeted over 17,000 times in 24 hours, and it was used a lot by like 4.7 million users around the world within just a couple of days. Just amazing, the tsunami that happened with that. So what that told me was, in my organization, I was either having blinders on to everything outside that was not going on within my own organization, but because we dealt with issues, it wasn't an issue for our organization. So that's why I was like, oh yeah, it's been around forever. It's not a big issue, but apparently there are some other things. Then came the silence breakers, the Harvey Weinstein, the women that broke that, had all kinds of accusations. They made it to the cover of Time magazine, and he used a lot of power comments and statements to people, throughout his career, like, I'm Harvey Weinstein, you know what I can do. I'm a man who has great resources. I have ears and eyes everywhere. One phone call and you're done. And a lot of times that is all based around power, which is which is typically the unlawful sexual harassment issue. And after Weinstein, there were a number of other Hollywood people that were, shown to or were also accused. Very few females. Typically, the perpetrator is a male, or and the victim is typically female. I added Katy Perry onto this list simply because several seasons ago, after all of this broke, she kissed a contestant on American Idol, right? And everybody was like, why isn't that sexual harassment? Why? Well, part of it, as we'll talk in a little while, has to be unwelcome, unwanted. And so did it rise to anything? I haven't seen or heard anything. Asia Argento was one of the original women accusing Harvey Weinstein, was later found that she, or supporting it anyway, and she later was found to have had some probably inappropriate relations with a young man. So we don't hear a whole lot about it, but it was there, just so you know a little bit of that backstory. So we just say, oh, that's all Hollywood. That's not ever going to happen to us here, right? Well, we can't, because that stuff is so pervasive and in front of us all of the time. We can't deny that sexual harassment exists, and it exists sometimes in our organizations. And we just need to make sure that we take a look at it and make sure that we're doing what we need to create the respectful work environment that each of our organizations need. So have you ever heard of the term quid pro quo? Anyone? Anyone brave enough to go into the chat or unmute your mic and feel free to just say, what does quid pro quo mean? Absolutely. In the employment arena, the type of sexual harassment, quid pro quo, means this for that, where an employment decision is made based on an employee's willingness to grant or deny a sexual favor. So Harvey Weinstein's casting couch could be a good example of quid pro quo harassment, right? In our organizations, it might be that somebody gets a promotion, or they get a better raise, or an evaluation, or they might get a really crappy assignment, or they might get a bad evaluation, or they might be demoted. That is your typical quid pro quo. And that means this for that. You've got that down. Your policies in your organization probably address that under your sexual harassment policy. Hostile work environment. Anybody willing to speak up and say, either through the chat or unmute, and what their thoughts are about hostile work environment? And what that means? Okay. 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 Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we're going to look at a couple of things when we talk about hostile work environment, because you're right. Hostile has the implication that it's hostile, and it can mean a couple of things. We have unlawful, hostile work environment, harassment, and then a hostile work environment where it's a toxic environment, and maybe unlawful, or not unlawful. Sorry. The unlawful is the hostile work environment that we want to talk about, make sure we're aware of. Hostile work environment that is unlawful is verbal or nonverbal workplace behavior that focuses on sex and gender of another person or any other protected group, and includes age, disability, national origin, race, color, religion, pregnancy, genetic information. The behavior is unwanted, or unwelcome, and is severe and pervasive enough to affect a reasonable person's work environment. This is the most common form of harassment that people claim, and it is less clear cut and is more subjective. What does that mean? We go back to the unlawful versus unacceptable. Somebody is harassing you. So let me go back. A lot of times I would have employees come into my office and say, Wendy, I'd like to file a claim. I've got a hostile work environment. And I would always ask the employee, okay, help me understand what it is. Describe to me what it is that you're experiencing, what's going on. Give me some examples, give me some information. Well, I don't like the way that my supervisor or coworker's talking to me. They're condescending, they're rude, they slam doors, they give unreasonable deadlines, they pick and choose. Sometimes their favorite employees to get, only the best assignments. But it feels toxic. It's hostile, because I don't like the way that person makes me feel when they're being rude, obnoxious, a jerk, whatever you want to fill that in. And my question generally back to them was, does it have anything to do with that's a protected behavior? Your gender, your disability, age, national origin, race, color, religion, pregnancy, anything that's protected? A lot of times people would respond no. And my response is, we're going to still look at this, because that's what our policy says, and we'll address it. But under our policies, under the unacceptable behavior side, I know that it feels toxic and it feels hostile, but it may or may not rise to the level of unlawful harassment. And we would move forward that way. Is that clear? The unlawful versus the unacceptable? we've got to have policies on both, and we've got to deal with, and we need to make sure that we're addressing both, because if we don't deal with the unacceptable behavior, eventually it is going to rise to a level potentially of unlawful harassment. And sometimes employees are not able to maybe describe it initially as clearly, and it's not always clear cut whether it is or is not a hostile work environment based on something to protected until you start doing some investigating. And once you start looking into things, sometimes things turn up, and what seems like it might not have been only might have been on the surface only unacceptable behavior, things start coming out. And then sometimes you do end up with an unlawful harassment case. So you got to be real careful and make sure that we're addressing those issues when they're brought to our attention. Okay. Sometimes it depends. And a lot of times the answers that you'll get is it depends. It depends on the individual. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on the culture in the department, the culture in the organization. A lot of things are going to make those decisions. Unwanted, unwelcome, go if you observed somebody walking up, you've got the person that's the shoulder rubber, or the person that walks up, they put their arm around you, might feel uncomfortable. But people are sometimes afraid to say anything. But you can tell by the look on someone's face, that it's like, kind of grimacing. If you're observing that's a sign to you, that person probably is uncomfortable. And as a supervisor, you're supposed to have supervision, meaning better vision than your employees. And if you're seeing something like that, and even as a coworker, you might want to say something. Hey, I don't think so. And so and so appreciates what's happening here. And we want to be sure that we are paying attention to those kind of cues as supervisors and leaders. But every situation is going to be different. A lot of people are afraid to come forward because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of losing their jobs. Sometimes they are single income families, or it might be a single family, might be just a single parent trying to provide for their family, and they're worried that they might not find another job. So there's a number of reasons why people do. It could be gradual, why people, come up, do that, but it just varies. Did I answer your question, Ashley? Okay, you're welcome. So who is the victim and who is the harasser? Any thoughts on that, anyone? Who would be the victim and who would be the harasser in either a hostile work environment or a unlawful sexual harassment? Well, could be a man, could be a woman, does not have to be of the opposite sex, it can be of the same sex. Harasser can be victim supervisor, an agent of the employer, supervisor in another area, coworker, or non-employee. The victim does not have to be the person harassed, but could be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. Unlawful harassment can occur without economic discharge, and the harasser's conduct must be unwelcome. So if we go back to non-employee or that could be a delivery person. Maybe somebody signs for packages every single day, and the delivery driver is harassing or asking that person out on a date regularly or something like that. And maybe they're uncomfortable with that. If they come to you as a supervisor, understand that an outside party, it could very well be something that you definitely need to look into and address. It doesn't have to be the person harassed, but could be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. So if Johnny and I are having a conversation and we are completely okay with that conversation, and Ashley happens to overhear it and she's offended by that, that is a third-party claim, and we need to look at those too. We need to be conscientious that that exists. A lot of times the feedback I get is, well, I was in the lunchroom, they shouldn't be listening to my conversation, or we were in the locker room, or on the job site, shouldn't be listening, that was a private conversation. Well, the expectation in most organizations is that you have a respectful workplace, and those are areas, even a work site that's maybe not in a city building or in a lunchroom or a locker room. The expectation is that those still go to, those behaviors. A respectful workplace is expected in those work areas also. So we need to be conscientious of those. And without economic injury or discharge doesn't mean, it might be that somebody suffers in silence and then they just decide to leave. And sometimes you don't know it. You wonder why you have a revolving door going on sometimes with turnover. Might not be unlawful harassment, but it might be some unacceptable behavior that's going on. So you want to keep an eye out as a supervisor, making sure that you're taking care of business the way that you need to. And of course, the harasser's conduct must be unwelcome. Now, this is an interesting one because when I first started in my local government career, I had two individuals in my office, a male and a female, that were quite affectionate towards one another. And, like probably way more affectionate. And who wants to say anything, right? It wasn't unwelcome by the other party. It's kind of a third party kind of thing, right? Because you're witnessing some behaviors going on. And my issue with that was, these two people were both married to other people. And, and it was like, okay, what moral high ground? Well, it's not really a moral high ground. It's just, to me, it was not appropriate in the workplace, regardless of that. And so, we have to be conscientious of that kind of behavior. So it has to be unwelcome, but even though it's welcome by someone else and they're participating, doesn't mean that the line won't change. Here's the line today, but it moved. And somebody else could be offended by the behavior. The other thing that we have to be conscientious of is looking at things over time. If it was a one-off here, one-off there, or something like that, and there's a lot of one-offs and a lot of things going on in a specific department, collectively, the EEOC is generally going to look at those kinds of things as potentially a hostile work environment. If you have something here, something there, in my organization, I can't speak to yours, but in my organization, any of these claims came through and HR was involved as part of that investigation process. And part of that is to monitor what's going on throughout your whole organization, so you understand what's going on collectively. And if you see collectively, it was only one time with this person, it was only one time with this person, it was only one time with this person, collectively, those incidents can make you think, there's potentially something else going on here, potential hostile work environment, even if it's varying degrees of protected categories that are being offended, or a lot of unacceptable behavior potentially going on. I'm going to show a video clip, and these were several interviews that Matt Lauer did over time. And if you were to watch these periodically, watch one here and see one there, you might not think a whole lot of it. But when you condense them and put them all into one video, it gives a little bit of a different perspective and tries to bring home the point I'm trying to make. Know that in the video, the audio will probably come through. The video may be a little bit choppy, but we understand that with the Zoom technology and everything, sometimes that happens. So we'll go ahead and start that video.
In light of the assault and harassment allegations directed at former Today Show anchor Matt Lauer, many of the morning show icon's on-screen moments are now being reviewed through a much darker lens. Lauer was fired from his post at NBC in November 2017 after 20 years with the network. Given these awkward, cringe-worthy segments, it now seems surprising that his career survived for so long. Madonna. When Lauer sat down with Madonna in 2003 for Dateline, he began by asking her about an editorial in the New York Times that essentially declared her too old to be relevant. She wasn't amused, arguing that artists shouldn't need to fall into a certain age group in order to have worth in the business.
It's just disrespectful and it's absurd.
He followed by asking her if she feels threatened by younger pop stars, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera.
Would you like those 17-year-olds to buy your records?
I would. You know
They're
why?
the age of their parents.
Lauer then pushed the Queen of Pop to explain why she was still famous compared to other artists with the same amount of talent.
You started in this business with people that we don't talk about anymore. Why are we still talking about you?
I don't know. Go ask them.
It's safe to say that after this segment, Madonna probably started tuning into Good Morning America instead of Today. Sandra Bullock. Oscar winner Sandra Bullock appeared on Today in 2009 to promote The Proposal, in which she has a particularly amusing scene, without clothes, with co-star Ryan Reynolds.
The major thing that's changed since you were here last?
Yes.
I have now seen you naked.
And throughout the interview, he couldn't seem to let it go, joking that the scene was his new screensaver.
You're naked for most of this movie.
I so
It's a long
No,
stretch.
I'm not naked for most of this.
Except for-
Emotionally naked.
And towards the end, he, of course, brought it up again.
Did I
Thank you.
mention you have a nude scene in this movie?
Pretty much from the time you opened
From
your
the
mouth.
time?
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock. Come back more often.
No, not after this interview.
Vince Gill's daughter. During an appearance on Watch What Happens Live in January 2014, Lauer admitted that he'd been ogling country singer Vince Gill's daughter, who performed as Amy Grant's backup singer on Today.
And I kind of went up behind him and I said, I know, are those things real? And he turned to me and said, they better be real. That's my daughter.
Anne Hathaway. In December 2012, Anne Hathaway was photographed having a wardrobe malfunction while exiting a car at the Les Miserables premiere. When she appeared on Today the same week to promote the movie, Lauer was less than kind, though she remained composed and classy.
Nice to see you.
Morning, Matt.
Seen a lot of you lately.
Sorry about that.
You were.
I'd be happy to stay home, but the film.
Lauer kept going, asking if she learned a lesson. The Oscar winner calmly responded that it was an unfortunate incident that made her sad.
I was very sad that we live in an age when someone takes a picture of another person in a vulnerable moment and rather than delete it and do the decent thing, sells it.
Miley Cyrus. In 2013, during Miley Cyrus's twerking phase, she appeared on Today, and Lauer asked her about her provocative MTV Video Music Awards performance.
Is the sexual side of you that we're seeing a lot of right now, something that's going to be here for a while?
Cyrus asked back that it would perhaps be when she turns 40, since she heard that's when people lose their drive in the bedroom.
Don't say that. Do you know how old I am?
I'm going to guess 40. You don't...
I love you again.
Pippa Middleton. When interviewing Pippa Middleton in June 2014, following the royal wedding for her sister, Kate Middleton, and brother-in-law, Prince William, Lauer steered the conversation toward Pippa's clothing choice for the big event.
For lack of a better way to explain it, the way your dress fit.
Pippa said the attention was a little embarrassing and that her dress was meant to be almost insignificant. GM CEO Mary Barra. In 2014, Lauer faced criticism following an interview with General Motors CEO Mary Barra, in which he asked her, "There are some people who are speculating that you also got this job as a woman and as a mom. You could present a softer image and softer face as this company goes through this horrible episode."
Well, it's absolutely not true. I believe I was selected for this job based on my qualifications.
Lauer later asked if she could handle the pressures of the new job on top of being a mom.
I think I can.
Pot and kettle. In September 2017, in what now looks like a case of the pot calling the kettle black, Lauer interviewed Fox News personality Bill O'Reilly, who'd been fired due to harassment allegations.
Did you ever send a lewd text or email to another employee at Fox News? No.
Like Lauer, O'Reilly claimed to have had no human resources complaints brought against him ahead of his firing, calling the termination a, quote, political and financial hit job.
And so why didn't you sue those women if you say you did absolutely nothing wrong?
Not long after this interview, Lauer would face his own public scrutiny after being accused of harassment himself. Thanks for watching. Click the Nikki Swift.
Does that put into kind of perspective over time? Because some of those went back to like 2003, 2004, up until more current of things to kind of watch for. And several of the things that were talked about wasn't just one thing, right? It was age. I'm going to ask that the HR people not answer this question, but if you're age and you're discriminated against based on age, is there an age threshold, or what is the age that's protected under Title VII? Anyone? Is it 18, 30, 25, 60? So depending on, thank you for that. If somebody is alleging age discrimination, the federal statute is 40 and over, potentially. Employees that are younger, alleging age discrimination may not be successful in the state of Texas because we do not have laws that protect younger workers, although there are some states that do. But 40 is that threshold, 40 and over, that for age discrimination. And he talked about that. There's family status, sexual innuendo, the way your dress fit, a lot of comments and things, that sometimes we just like, oh, that's just Matt, or, oh, that's just, whomever. We need to be conscientious of that. So how do we deal with things? Well, we make sure that we've got the policies and things in place to support us in our decisions, and we deal with things. We don't sweep them under the rug. We don't stick our heads in the sand. We deal with issues. And so we start by strengthening our policies. And that includes making sure we've got a policy that's specific to sexual harassment and all other forms of harassment, and include the complaint procedure. You most definitely want that complaint procedure in there, because if somebody needs to complain, they need to know how to complain and to whom. Sometimes I hear people say, well, they've got to go through the chain of command. Not so. If it is or they've got to stay in the department, not so. HR is a resource to be able to help with that in the instances that it's a direct supervisor or the department that's not listening and not helping with things. So we want to make sure we include that. Extend the policy to include prohibition of sexual harassment or of harassment of any kind, or inappropriate derogatory remarks in social media outlets. So there needs to be a policy that addresses the social media, that it extends to it. It's not going to be very good of me to have my TML shirt on there and, and making posts and things that are inappropriate and unlawful against another employee. Avoid specific and limited definitions of sexual harassment, such as sexual harassment is and these 5 things, because it could be a number of things, and it could be a cumulative number of things. So we want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. But we do want to provide examples that our employees will easily understand. We want to focus on what appropriate behavior at work looks like in the work environment. And if certain behavior is inappropriate but not unlawful, your policies and your culture should set out these expectations by an appropriate behavior policy, or maybe an unacceptable behavior policy. We know what those should look like, and we want to make sure that we have those. We need to make sure that we have several options for reporting harassing behavior, supervisor, department head, and or human resources. To my employees, it was always HR is outside that chain of command, and you can come here and have a conversation, and especially if it's a harassment or something. And we did that even with our part-time people in their orientation, because we didn't want things to go on. And we want to make sure that we include a robust retaliation provision, saying that we will not tolerate retaliation. Many times if somebody alleges any kind of harassment, a retaliation claim happens, is usually attached to that. And if an adverse employment action happens against an employee, then potentially, and an adverse employment action could be a demotion, a suspension, termination. That's problematic. We also want to make sure that we maintain confidentiality to the extent possible. We try to keep things as confidential as we can. When I talk to my employees, we let them know up front, we're going to keep this as confidential as we can, but obviously in some instances, we're going to have to, call in other witnesses. Sometimes you talk to the alleged harasser and they admit it. Makes things pretty easy, but you want to make sure that you're covered no matter how you slice it. And you want to make sure that you've got language that says we are going to do a prompt, thorough, and an impartial investigation. Prompt isn't 6 months after the complaint comes in. Prompt may be the next day or the same day, or it could be reasonable to be within a couple of days. We're going to be thorough. We're not just going to, sweep it under the, ask a few questions. We want to make sure that we're thorough and that we are impartial. I always asked my employees, are you comfortable with me? And I always had two people doing that investigation. It was myself, usually in a department head, or either from that department or from a different department investigating, because I want to make sure there's two people there hearing this. But I also asked the person, are you comfortable? And that's because, and can I be impartial? Can I be impartial? I have to look at myself as a supervisor. For example, if a complaint comes in against a supervisor who happens to be my kid's coach in baseball, do you think that there has the appearance of that I might not be able to be impartial because it's my kid's baseball coach? Or in my case, what if somebody complained about the city manager who was my boss? That could be problematic, right? For me. Could I be impartial? Could people assume what if I found him, yes, you violated our policy or harassment policy, or no, I didn't. That's a no-win situation. So we have to evaluate those. And sometimes bringing in a third party to investigate is a wise decision in an organization. It just depends. You're going to have to talk through those nuances in your organization to see if that's a wise thing to do, because then you get an unbiased third party that's looking at that with on a completely clean canvas. They don't have any preconceived notions about any person or anything. They just have the complaint and they're starting to look into it. You can consider also offering a third-party reporting vehicle for employees to provide complaints. We see this a lot more probably in private industry than we do unless it's a larger organization. But it is an option as well. My friend worked for a company and that's how they handled theirs. Their HR was involved in that process with them, but there was that third party, that they could go and they could report if they didn't feel comfortable doing that. We want to have language that addresses corrective action and is prompt and proportionate, appropriate for the crime, and designed to prevent further unacceptable behavior, even if the conduct is not unlawful. So sometimes, for me, I would say, is it unlawful? We would address that at some point through those policies. Once we've gotten through and we've made a determination, I put something in writing to the complainant, let them know that, it did or did not rise and that we're handling it appropriately. I don't share with what we're doing with them. I get them to sign that document and give them a copy of it. And then the person who is the alleged harasser, give them something similar. And, you were guilty of it. We're going to maybe fire you, depending on what it was. You were guilty of it. First offense, you've been a long tenured, didn't seem like it was intentional. It was, but we want to make sure that this doesn't happen. If it's unacceptable behavior, it's something like, while it doesn't rise to the level of unlawful harassment, which is against our policies, we also have policies against unacceptable behavior. This will not be tolerated. In the future, we expect that your conduct with other employees will be an XYZ, and lay out those expectations for that employee. Again, get them to sign it, get them to date it, give them a copy of it, keep it in your investigation file. And And then the last one, which has a lot of talk, and my friend Paul, the other trainer that some of y'all maybe met last week, consider a no dating or relationship policy. That's an organization's decision, totally. I understand in some communities it's challenging because everybody might be, they're small enough, everybody's knows everybody, right? Or they've, that's it. My friend met and married his wife at work, and they've been married over 30 years. And I had the experience of the dating game from Hades. And, and it was one of those things that just was so disruptive. And so we didn't say you couldn't date. We just strongly discouraged it in our policy. We strongly discouraged a department head from dating a subordinate, or a manager dating a subordinate. And if they were dating, it was the person in power, which would be the one who had, over the power over the other, to report it to HR. That was to kind of put us on notice, just in case. You never know what's going on. But that was the organization that I worked in, and that was how we chose to handle that. An organization's culture totally sets the tone. You have to tie your policy to your culture. Policy should not be just words on paper. It has to, what we tolerate, we advocate. So if we're tolerating and we're allowing something to happen, then we're an advocate for it. We're not saying anything about it. The assumptions and beliefs of employees drive behavior. The collective behavior of the employees determines the results, and the results measure performance and indicate if strategic business objectives have been met. So you want to make sure. Any questions, comments, or criticisms so far? All right. We're going to go on. I've got another video here, and this one is from The Big Bang Theory. And if you haven't had this, there are occasions when you will run into this, where you run into an employee who is completely oblivious. So I want you to pay attention. And sometimes you'll notice in this video too, that once you start investigating things, suddenly people start talking. And if they are the potentially the alleged harasser, they're going to start fanning the flames off their own backside, and they are going to start throwing other people under the bus. So you just need to be prepared. And this clip kind of indicates that.
Human Resources Department. Human Resources Department. Human Resources Department.
Come in.
Hello.
Dr. Cooper, have a seat.
Thank you.
I called you in today because your assistant, Alex Jensen, has lodged a complaint against you.
So I've been told, but I can't understand what she has to complain about. I mean, she has a front row seat as I make scientific history, but there's string cheese in my mini fridge, and that's for anyone. And just yesterday, I led her away from a life of sexual promiscuity by making her look at pictures of disease-ridden genitalia.
Cancel my next appointment. This is going to take a while. Dr. Cooper, you said things to your employee that you just cannot say in the workplace.
Like what?
Well, according to Ms. Jensen, you said that she was a slave to her biological urges and called her an egg salad sandwich. I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you you can't say it.
Oh, I see the confusion here. No, Alex thought I was singling her out. No, I meant that all women are slaves to their biological urges, even you. You're a slave.
I'm a what?
Well, I'm just saying, at a certain point in a woman's menstrual cycle.
I can't talk about that either, Dr. Cooper. Your language is entirely inappropriate, and I'm going to advise that you shut your mouth right now.
Yeah, well, I don't see why I'm the one being persecuted here. You know, Dr. Hofstadter, he was bragging about his sexual desirability to anyone who would listen. You know, and Howard Wolowitz, he spent 2 years using university resources building a 6-breasted sex robot. You know, and at the office Christmas party, I heard Rajesh Koothrappali refer to you several times as brown sugar.
Hofstadter, Wolowitz, and the last one was Rajesh Koothrappali.
Yes. You know, yeah, but in his defense, that wasn't racist. He's also brown.
So do we sometimes just go from bad to worse and we just dig ourselves and dig ourselves and dig ourselves? I can tell you in my career, there have been those moments when you're like, this is going to be a while, and everything else gets canceled. You know, these are very time consuming. They're very disruptive to the workforce. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything, our part, everything that we can as supervisors and employees to make sure that we are creating a respectful workplace. So what might be some unlawful behaviors, do you think, related to sexual harassment or hostile work environment? Anyone? Feel free to chat them or unmute your mic. Do I have all afternoon people in this class and you need 82 cups of coffee before we engage a little bit, right? I totally get that. I'm the morning person. I am up early, ready to go, right? And I have coworkers that maybe not so much, and I get it. So sometimes they're a little bit more quiet, and that's okay. So some unacceptable behaviors could obviously sexual assault, which is a criminal act. And I know that my law enforcement folks get that. Denying a subordinate employee a term or condition of employment because of his or her refusal to submit to sexual advances, asking for sex or other advances, even sexual advances, even if it's not demanded or threatened as a condition of employment, could be a coworker. Engaging in any form of sexual activity, including exposing yourself or simulating sex acts, making comments that are sexual in nature or have a sexual overtone, sexually suggestive or explicit conversations between two consenting employees or friends, employees of the same gender, or among friends while they're at work. That's your third party conversations or third party complaints. Comments that reference the appearance of a sexual nature or comments at unacceptable times or frequencies. So the last one kind of gets people going, what do you mean by unacceptable times or frequencies? I'm just not going to say anything to anyone, which, you know, may or may not be. I think if somebody says, oh, you look nice today, or did you get your hair done? It's different. It, you know, it looks nice, is a far cry and much different as a compliment, if it was genuinely intended, versus somebody looking you up and down saying, hey, baby, you look pretty hot today in that dress, or, you know, dude, you look awfully good in those, you know, in that muscle shirt, or whatever it happens to be. So, you know, unacceptable, you've got to, what words are we using, right? And then unacceptable times and frequencies. If I said, hey, your tie looks nice today, and I said it once and went off, no big deal. But if I said, hey, that tie, if I said that, you know, hey, that tie looks nice about 80 times in the next 45 minutes, a creep factor kind of starts setting in, doesn't it? I mean, there's a creep factor to the person that's actually in the victim of any of those kind of comments or any of these behaviors. It's a creep factor. And we start just getting this weird, uneasy feeling, but unacceptable times and frequencies could be an issue. Repeatedly asking someone out for a date, even if they've previously declined. Well, they didn't say no, they just said I was busy. Well, if 72 times somebody tells you that they're busy, might be that they're really not interested and they're trying to be polite and not say anything. So, you know, that's a slippery slope there. Sexist, racist, or other hate-based comments, publications, hate symbols that relate to any protected group that we talked about earlier. And then blocking someone's freedom of movement, locking doors behind them. as a personal practice, I always never had usually somebody between me and my door if I felt uncomfortable, right? In a conference room or some of these meetings and things. But in this particular one, we go back to our friend Matt Lauer that we watched in the video, and there's kind of a creep factor after you watch all those things, all those clips, consecutively. There was also apparently from him a button that was installed in his desk that would lock the door behind sometimes the assistants and things that would come into his office. Now, that's a who knew, should have known. Isn't that kind of weird in a place of employment for, people had to know, somebody had to authorize it. There was IT, an electrician, building maintenance probably, but that is kind of one of those things. We want to make sure that we're not locking doors and doing things like that that can be construed as blocking someone's movement. Jokes, emails, videos that are sexual, suggestive, or gender biased. Don't forward anything. If you get it, delete it. Jokes, emails that are stereotype, belittle, or make fun of any protected group. And you'll see, making fun of someone's disability or accent or dress for religious purposes or other protected area. Anybody hear of the company Abercrombie and Fitch? Familiar with them? A couple of years ago, they had an applicant applying for a job with a head wrap on, and they said that their clients would not appreciate it, and that's why they didn't hire this individual. They lost a claim. You would think that they are in retail, that they would start making them and selling them instead of discriminating against someone that was wearing one, right? Sexual or suggestive material, cartoons, email, even if it was just a joke. And sometimes people try to cite that, oh, it was just joking, and I think that in today's world that we live in, I think there's an ultra sensitivity to everything. So we need to make sure that we are on our toes, because people feel like they've got a voice. Since the hashtag Me Too, people feel like they can say something and something will be done where it might have been pushed under the rug years ago, right? Or maybe not so many years ago. Obviously, the behaviors, terms of endearment, such as honey, doll, sweetheart, babe, and things like that. They're appropriate at home, but maybe not so much at the office. Now, I had a mayor that called everybody honey girl. And so did I take offense to it? No. What do you do? But you have to understand that in some instances, somebody's going to be upset by being called. If I was called doll, hey doll, or sweetheart, in the workplace, I don't know. It would depend maybe on the person, but you don't know how somebody's going to respond to a comment like that. Innuendo of suggestive nature, such as leering, whistles, and catcalls. And I encourage you, if you are in a city uniform, if you are in a city vehicle and you're catcalling or you're whistling or you're making advances, I can tell you I have received complaints from citizens of things going on, giving me a unit number and a time and a day. And we had GPS tracking devices on our vehicles. So we could probably pinpoint whether or not that interaction would or would not have happened. So we want to make sure that we are always taking the high road and doing the right thing for the right reasons at the right time and in the right way. We've got to be very conscientious of that. And obviously the behaviors are not all inclusive. There's probably others, but it's just kind of to give you some things to think about. We're going to watch another video, and this is some construction people in the Houston area. This came out shortly after the hashtag Me Too and talking about things. And I'm going to cut it off because it's kind of long, but we'll watch that and then we'll move forward.
It sounds like you guys have a pretty limited interaction with women during most of your workday. What's that like? I mean, how are women treated on job sites? Like, what's it like to do construction and have women on the site?
Man, my honest answer on the job site we have right now, I've seen some stuff that'll probably touch my soul if I was a woman. They choose to draw pictures on the wall of the woman and not so flattering pictures at that.
Like women you're working with, those women, they draw pictures of those women?
Yeah, on this job in particular, yes. Pictures of them with words and sentences that's not so flattering, you know.
Like what kind of words and sentences?
Well, in particular, it's one lady that I won't name her, but they have a picture of her, you know, basically saying the stuff they want to do to her on the wall, you know, for everybody to see. And if it was me, it would, you know, piss me off, you know.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Has she seen it?
I'm pretty sure, because it's on multiple floors of the same woman.
Damn. What do you think makes that happen? Why do you think why is that
immaturity? You know,
I mean, like they just don't like her.
No, they love her, but they should go about it showing it the wrong way. You know, it's not nothing like, you know, you know, she's ugly. It's like, oh, she's beautiful, I want to do stuff with her. You know, that type of stuff. But it's, you know, it's inappropriate.
Damn, well, it's got pretty heavy pretty quick from where I expected. Have you guys all had this sort of experience?
Well, you know, I work with office ladies and I work with the ladies that we have on the field. So there's actually a difference between them. You know, ladies you see on the field, they have harder skin, you can say. You know, they can take jokes. It's a different way they approach things. They see the drawing and it's just a drawing, you know. Versus somebody here from the office sees that it's gonna hit human resources and it's gonna explode real quick.
Do you think the women in the office are too sensitive, or the women in the field are not sensitive enough?
I think they're being exposed at different levels. So it's a layer of skin that develops when you're in the field that you have to let stuff roll off your back.
The environment makes them change, you know.
Me personally, I mean, I just saw it the other day. It was just a conversation I was walking by, and the guy said something, I forget what, and you could tell she has thick skin because she said, "Hey, and she stopped him right there, and that was it. He didn't say nothing else. You know, she had control over the whole situation. It was like she wasn't gonna put up with it, you know?
I'm just interested to know if you feel like the change that's happening in the country, which we feel like we're having this change all over the place, if that's happening down here on a construction site in Texas, or if it's just some conversation people are having in New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is something that's been going on already since long before it started going in the media. It's just outlined more now with everything that's going on. When I first started working in construction, there were hardly no women at all out there. And once it started popping out more and more, you did start hearing more issues with them. You know, the foremen had to talk differently because now it wasn't just the guys you're talking to, but hey, now there's a lady in the room. So you got to change it up. You know, you can't just talk like if she's one of the guys, you know.
Do you think you understand sort of where the lines are, or have the lines changed?
I think that the line has always been there, but, you know, like you should know not to go up to a woman and say, "Hey, I'm going to grab you by the vajayjay," you know. That's just something you don't say.
I think that us as guys, we know where the boundary line is at. And the women, they actually set that line depending on who you're talking to. You know, there's some women that they're very clear about, hey, this is as far as you're going to go. And there's some that will joke around with you more. And there's some jokes that you're like, in your mind, you're like, should I be really saying that? But she makes it seem like it's cool. So sometimes those boundaries get pushed a little further than what they are, you know.
You think guys who push those boundaries should get fired?
Yeah, some of these guys, you know, like I said, it all depends because, you know, if the girl is okay with it, you know, and she's actually allowing it to happen, then she's playing along with the situation. So it's not something for you to get fired with because you're playing with it, you know. But then again, she shows up one day not in the mood to play, and that boundary was already crossed, you know.
Yeah, the guy got fired.
And then now the guy gets fired.
Cross it in the first place.
Shouldn't have crossed it in the first place, right? I remember when we had our first, this was years ago, our first female public works employee that was going to be working in the field. We went to the department and we went back through our processes, our policies, and what was expected of a respectful workplace. You know, and I think there was some nervousness about, you know, what if I say something and, you know, much the same, you know, you want to be respectful of this person. If you give a compliment, you know, as long as it's not the creep factor and 85 times in 45 minutes, you ask that, you know, tell them that they look hot in that dress or whatever. In a field, they probably wouldn't, but you've got to be conscientious of those kinds of things. You know, in predominantly male things, I remember we got our first female firefighter at one of my cities, and much the same thing, much the same conversation. You know, we're going to have a respectful workplace, whether it's, you know, whether it's all guys, because, you know, same-sex harassment claims I've investigated too, where a male was offended by something that was said by another male, or a female was offended by something that was said by another female. So what might be appropriate at home and people's tolerance level for those things, you know, we shouldn't be bringing those kinds of conversations to a respectful workplace. So again, we'll transition. What do we do about this stuff? Well, we promptly, thoroughly, and impartially investigate the complaint. Even if we think that it has no merit, we don't want to be the one holding the bag. We want to document the outcome, including the decision and any discipline or any other action taken. We kind of talked about that earlier. And the reason that I document, have them sign it, is one time I got the joy of going to an EEOC mediation for an employee that had left. Under the circumstances, they alleged that it had to do with them filing a third-party complaint, which it did not. Was totally not related. But it doesn't stop people from telling a lie and making a claim anyway, and then you get to go through the fun of going through those processes. But when we went through mediation, as soon as we got our opportunity to speak, you know, that they had their opportunity first, and then we went in because it sounded like she complained and we didn't do anything, which was contrary to anything that we've ever done. But as soon as we gave copies of the letter that we had written and the plaintiff's lawyer had, or the plaintiff's client had signed, they asked for a recess. And then they went into the next room because this person had also lied to the attorney, to their attorney. And the mediator went with them, and within a very short period of time came back into our office and was like, "Can I hang out over here with you all? Because things are not very nice over there." Well, the attorney was embarrassed, right? Because somebody lied, and we had documented and we could prove it, you know, that we had it. All of our stuff when we're dealing with that is serious situations. You know, besides we're drafting it, we're having our legal review it to make sure that it's appropriate. If you observe, the complainant could still charge discrimination and litigate. Some people can file a charge, you know, whether it's true or false, they can make the accusation and charge. It's time consuming, costly, embarrassing to your organization, humiliating for you, your employees and families, and can cause your backlash from your citizens sometimes. We want to make sure that we encourage all of our employees to say something if they're uncomfortable with someone's behavior. We, in our orientation and throughout we encouraged our employees to talk to them. If you're offended by something, we give you permission to tell the other person, "I was offended and I would appreciate that you not say or do whatever it was again." You know, but there's a lot of people, again, it goes back to a lot of people are not comfortable doing that. They don't have any, you know, for whatever reason, some people are not, they're not, that's why we have the reporting mechanisms. Not too terrible long ago, well, I say not too long ago, within the last year, but seems like forever ago since I've traveled, was getting ready to check into a hotel. And I was up there, I had put my credit card in and then removed it, and it was just waiting to process, you know, or something. And out of my corner of my eye, I can see somebody walking very quickly up to me and then plopped their bag down and stood like this close to me. I had no idea who this person was. At the speed, and I would have expected to turn around and unexpectedly think that, oh, there's somebody here that I maybe know. But that was not the case. And I looked at, and this person then says, "You need to push a button or something on the credit card." This is how close this person was. They could see what was going on there. And I said, "Well, the computer's thinking right now. So You know, and then I thought about it for a minute because the person didn't back off. And I'm like, could you please, like, you're in my personal space. And we all know what that personal space is, right? 3 feet, generally, give or take. Although social distancing, it's now 6, so maybe we don't have those issues, right? But I was very uncomfortable, and the person was completely oblivious that they had violated that thing. It's kind of like going up to an ATM machine and somebody standing right next to you as you're getting money out of the ATM machine, right? A little bit different. If you observe somebody engaging in some behaviors, pull them aside and let them know that you saw it and that you expect them not do it again. If it's one of those one-offs, but I would document it, and I would also let HR know, hey, here's the deal. I had that, you know, there was an inappropriate joke. I addressed it with the person, you know, however, talk to your HR, make sure you're following your policies, whatever that outcome was. Totally dependent upon the situation. We're going to have to make sure don't tell somebody not to sexually assault somebody again. That's probably going to rise to a different level, right? So we've got to use some good common sense when we're making those decisions. And we have to be very, very careful that we aren't just letting things slide. You've got to be really, really careful about that. We need to make sure we train supervisors, that we train our employees, and that we train. You know, it's very regular that we need to keep that in the forefront, because sometimes if we don't hear something for a long period of time, we kind of forget, and then we get lax, and that's when things usually happen. Even if the people engaging in the unacceptable conduct are fine with it, it is not a defense for unacceptable conduct. That's your third-party complaints. Remember that professional meetings, business trips, and social events are an extension of your workplace, and alcohol sometimes makes us do things that we might not normally do. And those things can be an extension of your workplace, and we need to take anything there as well seriously. Social media is also a possible source. Make sure that you've got that policy that addresses it. And non-employees, citizens, vendors, contracted elected officials are possible sources of harassment as well as victims. So, questions, comments, or criticisms so far? We're in the home stretch. Everyone's just ready, right? Mhm. 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 Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. Something that I will say that I have heard from females sometimes is that it's different sometimes for females, because, you know, what some would say is, oh, this male person is being assertive, or he's being a leader. But sometimes a B word, if a woman says you're in my personal space, they're defined as being the B word. rhymes with witch, but I'm not going to say the real word there. So, and I've heard that comment from females throughout my career at a variety of levels. So we have to be conscientious of all those things. And you're right, that video is very appropriate. And I think it depicts a lot of things that sometimes go on, and we just need to make sure, again, especially as a supervisor, you have supervision or better vision than your employees, and your job, you're there to, protect the people that are working with and for you. So anything else? So I'm going to ask a question. Do y'all have unlimited budgets at your city? I can see laughing. I know, right? It does. And I know, I spent 25 years in local government. I know that budgets are limited, right? And then economic downturns and a number of things have, property taxes, everything has it can have an effect on that budget. So when claims come into TML, we receive them. We will assign an attorney. Even though we assign an attorney, cities still have deductibles. Sometimes the deductibles are $1,000, $2,500, $25,000. I've seen them as $100,000. Depends on the organization and how, everything. But sometimes we don't think about, we think, the insurance, or, the risk pool is going to pay. But we don't always pay. And in termination situations, if we wrongfully terminate someone because we discriminated and they're seeking front and back wages and different things like that, I'm going to say that that's an exclusion from the policy, and we may pay like this much, and you can see that, right? This much. And so those monies come from your budgets. Their city manager or HR is going to go, okay, finance, I need to find $100,000. And I've seen checks that big. I've seen checks over that, 50,000, 80,000, 200,000 coming from members because the cost is great. Now, I'm going to guess that a city manager is not going to go to the city council, and the city council is likely not going to go to the tax-paying citizens and say, we need a tax increase. They're going to balance that budget, right? And that budget means, look, we're making cuts. And sometimes you don't understand that as employees. We don't understand everything that's going on with those. And it may not always be the situation, but it could be that we're having to cut things because we've got to make up for $250,000 that we weren't prepared to pay because we did something that violated the law. So excuse me, I'm getting a little frog. So we want to be sure what kind of things get cut. Any thoughts? People, training, raises, adjustments to insurance, supplies, equipment, projects. A number of things get affected in an ability to do that. So why do I bring that up? Because this all started way back in the 1980s. Or actually, the lawsuit came out in the late 90s, but from 1985 to 1990, Beth Ann Farragher worked as intermittently as an ocean lifeguard for the city of Boca Raton, Florida. She sued the city and 2 lifeguards she accused of unwanted touching and making offensive comments and gestures. She said it was a really good job, except for the constant groping by one supervisor and sexual innuendos and comments by another. I understand that at one point she complained because the bathing suit that she got was too small. And so the supervisor put it on a sticky and put it on his desk and never called accounting or anybody to order a new suit for her because he had gotten pissed off at the accounting person. They didn't have a good relationship, so he didn't even want to go there. Her mother made a cover up for her bathing suit because she didn't get it. And one of the supervisors said, why are you covering up your boobs? So a number of kind of, not well thought out comments and inappropriate behaviors, right? ended up costing a whole lot of money. The case went to the Supreme Court, and the High Court said if the alleged harassers are supervisors, employers can be liable for damages even if the employer is not aware of the harassment. So even if the city didn't know or HR didn't know, but it's happening in the department and the supervisor knew, the city is on the hook. If it is a peer harassing peer, the employer is only liable if it knew or should have known about the harassment. And who's going to define you knew or you should have known? How does that? The courts work all that stuff out. So the court ruled that the employers can also be liable if there's no tangible job repercussions to the victim. This is where she didn't lose her job, she kept it, but she didn't say, she just continued to endure the harassment. The court outlined a two-pronged defense for employers. You have to have a sexual harassment policy to prevent harassment and promptly investigate complaints, and the employee must go through the channels outlined in the policy. Those are two-pronged, but we don't want to have just the two-pronged defense. We want the respectful workplace. We want the training, and we want things dealt with so that we don't have to deal with these issues that end up costing us lots and lots of money. Eventually, the city they ruled that the city was ultimately responsible for the discriminatory action of the supervisors. The city could not be found to have exercised reasonable care to prevent the supervisors' harassing conduct because nobody ever disseminated a copy of the anti-harassment policy to any of the parties involved. So it was impossible for the city to argue that its sexual harassment policy was effective. So my supervisors, we went through training on a very regular basis. All my employees went through, and every time they did, they signed off and they agreed. Going through this process, if you were hired in 1998 and you've not been through sexual harassment training, again, that, as an organization, that's something we've got to keep this out on the front. There's lots of resources to be able to use to make sure that we keep that out there. So we're going to go back through some, and in this case, it's important to note, I understand, I did not do this research, but it comes to me from a very reliable source that the city had to pay $100,000. The city manager had to pay $100,000. And the supervisor, one of the supervisors, also had to pay $100,000. Now, whether that went through the change or anything, those were at least the original dollar amounts. So big claims, lots of money. A couple of things I'm going to go through here just to tell you. These are mostly private. Well, this one's kind of a private public corporation, but the GEO Group got to pay $550,000 to settle a retaliation, sexual harassment and retaliation lawsuit with female staffers abused at a private correctional facility. Remember when I said a lot of times if an adverse employment action happens, retaliation is usually tagged on, and almost all claims that come through have the retaliation on there associated with it. SMX Staffing Company was sued for sexual harassment. A male supervisor harassed female workers, demanded sex, and exposed himself. EOC sues SMX Staffing Company for sexual harassment. Male supervisor harassed female workers. I did that one twice. Sorry, it didn't click it when it moved. Rocky Mountain Casing Crew pays $70,000 for sexual harassment. The North Dakota company subjected male employee to hostile work environment because of his sex and his sexual orientation. Now, you understand the U.S. Supreme Court just ruled that their interpretation is gender identity, sexual orientation, and things like that are going to be covered under sex. EEOC has been doing that for years. They just confirmed that not too terrible long ago. Bojangles got to pay $15,000 on a transgender employee subjected to gender identity harassment and then fired for reporting it. That's a retaliatory act. IHOP had a couple of claims here, sexual harassment and sexual harassment and retaliation in the one, and then one included simulating sex acts, solicitations for sex, and physical threats. And I understand that that this is one of these cases, the owner of the IHOP, the person, the alleged harasser was the owner's nephew, and they didn't do anything. But that's, you can't not do something, right? So again, I go back to, and I know I've said this, this is at least my third time. We need to have a sexual harassment policy. We need to encourage the use of your organization's complaint procedures. We need to investigate complaints promptly, thoroughly, and impartially. And I'm going to tell you, the impartial thing, sometimes we think that we can be impartial, but we are human beings and we have our own, sometimes our own biases about things. You know, if somebody's moral beliefs and things are different, we've got to be real careful about that and make sure that we're doing everything correctly. We need to maintain confidentiality to the extent possible, use appropriate corrective or disciplinary action. If you're a bystander, raise a concern if you've experienced or otherwise become aware of other harassing or unacceptable behavior. It's okay to say, I don't think what you just said was appropriate. You might ought to go apologize to that person. Always treat one another with dignity and respect, even in disagreement. Refrain from unlawful harassment and conduct that is unacceptable, even if it does not rise to the level of unlawful harassment. Report all complaints of unlawful harassment or other unacceptable conduct to your organization's point person, your supervisor, or HR, even if you are asked to keep the behavior confidential. Do not ever go there. There are some things when people would come in and say, Wendy, I want to talk to you about this, but I want you to keep this confidential. My response back to them was, there are some things that you tell me I have an obligation under the law to do something about. And we have to be able to say and do that because we want to make sure that we're taking care of things. Leadership, you do have a responsibility. If you see it, hear it, you can't ignore it. You have a responsibility to say or do something. So, any questions, comments, or criticisms? Mm-hmm. Depends on what they're talking about, but if it's inappropriate conduct, absolutely, that is potentially a third-party complaint. If they were offended by the behavior, if it violated the policies, whether it was unacceptable behavior or unlawful, that is potentially, depending on all the facts surrounding it, obviously, potentially can be problematic because, again, you're in the workplace and you're expected to have a respectful workplace in that workplace. Thank you for the question. Anything else that we've covered? Well, I want to remind everyone, if you have, if you're law enforcement and you need TCOL credit, if you would please private message Johnny your PID, and we'll turn that in for you. He has to be able to validate that he saw your picture as well as having the PID number for us to turn that in. We're going to leave the chat box open. Should be down there. You can see chat, and we'll leave that open for a couple of minutes. And you know, if you'd like to, you know, leave a comment or have a question or something, we'll be happy to answer those. And then obviously we want to make sure that the training that we're bringing to our members is appropriate. And if there, you know, if there were things that you like, things that you didn't like, please feel free to make those comments as well. Thank you for participating, and thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to come here and be with you this morning to bring this training. We appreciate the partnership very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Thank you.